Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome. And I will introduce myself. We'll kick it off to the presenters. You will stay in character. Do not disclose where you're from. So I'm Nathan Russell. Professionally, I'm Associate Director at Raytheon Technologies, Defense Aerospace company. And I've been involved with this competition for probably 7 years now. It's been a while. Chris?
Hi, Christopher Walton. I'm a Los Angeles attorney for the last 32 years, also an MBA.
Awesome. Scott?
Hi, I'm Scott Brown. I'm a retired clinical associate professor of strategy and management, also taught business ethics for 25 years.
Awesome. Okay, team, why don't you introduce yourselves to us?
My name is Hiro Matsumoto. I currently study finance and international business.
Okay, thanks.
My name is Luc Boulier Santelices, and I currently study finance and international business as well.
Good.
Oh, pardon me. My name is Songjun Won. You may call me Jun, and I am majoring management and international business.
Thank you. Okay, I'm going to read through a script and then I'll turn it over to you three gentlemen, and then I'll also hit the timer as well. So here we go. In this part of the competition, you are taking on a fictional business identity and assigning a fictional business identity to the judges. Please make sure everyone knows who you are and who they are before you begin. You'll have 25 minutes to describe the legal, financial, and ethical dimensions of the problem and to recommend a solution that passes muster on all three counts. During this time, teams will be uninterrupted. When you are finished, the judges will ask you questions for 10 to 15 minutes. During the Q&A, both you and the judges stay in character. After the Q&A, the judges will give you feedback outside of the role playing. Okay, you got 25 minutes. I'm going to start the timer. You can begin.
Perfect. So we are Carbon Shift. We are an environmental legal consulting firm, and we are presenting today to Chubb Limited and the board of directors of this company. As we begin, we first want to thank you all for your time today. We believe that this discussion will be helpful for you, and we very much look forward to the Q&A afterwards to dive more into the content. And additionally, there is a lot of numerics and metrics on our slides, so we'll pass along this information right after the presentation for you to have it available nearby. So our team comprises of the three of us today for this presentation, and our firm is looking to regulate carbon credits through private markets. We come from a variety of backgrounds. However, we believe that we can grasp the issue through many lenses and present a big picture idea on the subject. So today, first we'll get started on the understanding of what carbon credits are. There's a lot of jargon surrounding this market. It's a very confusing and it's a really tied up community that is really difficult to understand. So we'll make sure to understand the very basics of what carbon credits are before going to the current landscape and how it's shifting through legal challenges and battles, and then talk about how that will impact Chubb. Then talking about the risks involved through the legal, ethical, and financial means, and then some of our proposed solutions to the existing problem. So first, breaking down what carbon credits are. You may have heard what they are, but essentially in the 1990s, some of the Scandinavian governments, they wanted to reduce pollution. And the way they did that was to tax the emission of carbon dioxide by cubic tons. And so whenever a company would emit a cubic ton of carbon dioxide, then the Scandinavian government would charge them 1 to 25 euros per ton. At first, this created a lot of pushback in the 90s. And the EU was looking to adopt something similar. However, they decided to shift it and evolve it a little bit more into the existing EU ETS system. Now, the ETS system is a cap and trade market. And what this means is essentially there are 1.39 billion allowances to tons of carbon dioxide emitted into the atmosphere. And so each company, they purchase one of these allowances through an open market. And with the allowance, they're able to emit carbon dioxide up to that limit. Now, if a company fails to purchase one, or they go over the limit, then they'll be fined $100 per ton of carbon dioxide emitted. And in the following year, they must purchase a mandatory carbon allowance in the following year. Since this was established in 2005, a lot of firms wanted to push back, and they believe that they're being charged too much. And so one of the things that came about was the carbon credits and offset system to combat the ETS system. And so what carbon credits are essentially whenever a tree is planted, that tree in the future will absorb carbon dioxide. And firms can purchase the rights of that reduction in carbon dioxide in future years. That's one example. There are many others, such as reducing carbon dioxide through reducing machining or changing materials for other companies. And it's not an initiative that the company takes on themselves, but an investment into other communities. Now, this at first was a great idea. However, the main problem that we found is that there's practically no regulation on carbon credits. And so firms at the time, in the mid 2010s, they're able to buy millions and millions of carbon credits and not pay any dollars into the EU ETS systems. And they're able to bypass the system by purchasing carbon credits. And so one of the things that the EU ETS system did in recent years was in 2020, they banned the usage of these carbon credits in their markets. However, looking to the US and most markets around the world, there is no regulation still on carbon credits, and many firms continue to purchase carbon credits to offset their carbon emissions, whether for their own CSR reports, for their own initiatives, or for regulatory compliance in certain areas. On the right side, we have a few charts. We have one chart looking into how much an ETS credit is currently. In the past 3 years, it's hovered roughly around $60 to $100 per ton. Just for reference, one human on average in the US produces 16 tons of carbon dioxide per year. So you can imagine for an airline, it becomes millions and millions of dollars that they have to pay for these ETS systems. And then bottom right is the issuance of carbon credits. We can talk about them more during the Q&A and break it down more specifically, but there has been an increase in the issuance of carbon credits. However, in the last few years, there has been a decline in the issuance because of what the EU has done and what many other governments are likely to do in the future. Next, June will talk about the ethical complications that arise from carbon credits.
Thank you, Hiro. We at Carbon Shift have identified two major issues with carbon credit system. Firstly, it's the concept of commodifying pollution. By assigning monetary value in creation of pollution, we as a society are consenting and capitalizing on pollution. Is the difference between mandatory carbon credits emission allowances such as EU ETS and voluntary carbon credits is that while the EU ETS are allowances, caps that enforces legally limit on carbon emission, which means that you cannot produce any more carbon than this, or else you will face a legal repercussion. However, voluntary carbon credits do not limit on carbon production level. It is only an offset, an afterthought after the carbon has already been emitted to the atmosphere. So, and many scientists, which we will quote at Q&A in the appendices, we have suggested that offsetting is an ineffective way in slowing down climate change at the level of climate change that has already happened. And they argue that offsetting is too slow a process. And what we need to do to combat climate change is to prevent more further carbon carbon pollution. And we at Carbon Shift believe that opinion to be correct. And we also think prevention is better than remedy. And while voluntary carbon credits are only a remedy of it, not a very ineffective remedy, according to the scientists, we believe that actively decreasing carbon emission is an act of prevention, which should be our priority in the industry. And secondly, our concern is the allegation of greenwashing related to carbon credits. Greenwashing is when a company or organization makes a superficial or ineffective method of combating its sustainability initiatives and claiming that in their marketing to be a leader or a effective combatant in tackling climate changes and other sustainability issues. And carbon credits can provide these companies with an indirect, low effort and low impact way to claim that they are combating climate change. And these can be essentially be seen as an easy way out, cop-out way of promoting sustainability. So, and how the carbon credit works is that companies purchase the potential offsets from many organizations that operate a offset measure, which essentially means that companies are forwarding their sustainability responsibilities to these carbon creditors. And if you consult the chart on the right, these are the offset credits issued by various organizations standard. So VCS is issued by Vera and takes more than the majority of the credits issued. However, investigations found that the investigation into Vera finds that less than 10% of these credits actually result in tangible carbon offset. The number is 94.5 million thereabouts, which we will show in later slideshow, to 5.5 million thereabouts, which is a very low number compared to the claims. And furthermore, fraudulent insurance has been a concern, leading to lawsuits which have ruled certain measures by some organizations as fraudulently recording their activities in regards to carbon offset and creation and trading of carbon offset. So because of these perhaps ineffective nature of voluntary carbon credit and actually combating carbon emissions, several major companies have been sued by activists and law firms with misleading advertisement in their sustainability advertisements, including the case of Delta Airlines, which my colleague Luke will further dive into.
Yeah, so I'm going to talk about the example of Delta and how their lawsuit impacts our topic. So in May of 2023, Mayana Baron, a resident of California, filed a lawsuit against Delta. This lawsuit was seeking a class action status for grossly misrepresenting the total environmental impact of the operations in advertisements, corporate announcements, and promotional material by Delta. These allegations were based on the fact that the carbon offset by Delta was done by purchasing these carbon credits on the carbon offset market, which has been found to have foundational problems such as the following: a lot of inaccurate accounting, some non-additional effects on the worldwide carbon levels due to vendors crediting offsets for projects that would have occurred with or without the offsets being purchased by the company, some non-immediate and very long-reaching speculative emission reductions that will not only not happen for the next few years, but maybe for the next few decades. These purchases are still giving companies like Delta the opportunity to offset their emissions today. And finally, the impermanent projects, due to things, uncontrollable things such as diseases, natural disasters such as fires, tornadoes, or floodings, and human intervention. So the impact of the defendant's claims are that Delta has gained unmerited market share, especially from a specific group that is Gen Z and really ecologically friendly market share, who is willing to give up some of their comfort for some carbon neutrality. Furthermore, they have increased their profits, as specifically this type of person has been willing to pay more for a ticket instead of another company. And they claim that there is substantial amount of carbon emissions that are deemed offset. However, due to the reasons mentioned above, are still out in the air and have not been offset. Some additional facts we think that are important from this lawsuit are that Delta has denied the greenwashing allegations and has reaffirmed the public that they're still on track for their 2050 goal of being carbon net zero firm. The two motions of dismissal that Delta has filed have been denied by the judge. And the class action nature of this lawsuit is reaching what we estimate is about $1.26 billion. And the description of this estimate is down below in this table, and the payout by elderly and disability towards the rest of the customers is also in the pie chart to the right. Now we will dive more into what Chubb Limited is. So Chubb is one of the largest publicly traded property and casualty insurance companies in the world, with a market cap of over $100 billion. It has operations all over the world in more than 50 countries and more than 3 continents, with a wide range of insurance products. It insures both large corporations as well as small businesses such as boutiques, and also insures personal and private people such as big automotive collections and valuable articles. Chubb also offers multiple peril crop insurance and crop haul insurance through their agribusiness section. Here we can see a chart about the revenue breakdown by country. To the right, you will see that we're going to talk about Chubb Climate Plus. Chubb Climate Plus is Chubb's initiative to support the transition of businesses to a low carbon economy and address the climate-related risks and opportunities that these entail. They offer solutions in different aspects, such as renewable energy, carbon technology, climate finance, as well as others. However, we have found that there's a lot of concern, as some of the customers that they insure are the same ones that are issuing carbon credits. This could be really bad for Chubb's reputation, as they can be deemed liable and have to pay millions of dollars in insurance, as well as its bad reputation, as they are one of the industry's largest promoters of climate and environmental health. Now I will pass it on to Hiro for the next, to Yoon for the next slide.
Hello. Thank you, Luke. So I want to suggest in regards to some potential risk factor that we Carbon Shift have we identified within operation of Chubb. The first is risk from clients' greenwashing allegation. So while Chubb, you do not directly employ carbon credits, some clients would use carbon credits to promote its sustainability measure. And as carbon credit are often decentralized, it is difficult to correctly underwrite clients' environmental impact. What that means is that carbon credits are issued by various different issuers and are differently valued according to what type of project the offsets are happening under. So these decentralized all over the place nature of the actual value of carbon credits offset makes underwriting a very difficult and complicated move. And furthermore, carbon credits have been accused with promoting selectivism, and with lawsuits happening, with environmental lawsuits like Delta's case happening, this can damage the asset value of the clients. This leads to two financial problems two financial potential risk for Chubb. The first being that the decrease in value results in decrease of your potential business, which means that often higher asset leads to higher insurance cost, which is higher revenue for you. However, if those assets decrease due to direct result from lawsuits and decrease in brand value because of those lawsuits, you cannot charge as much as their values. And further, if their value is decreased by these lawsuits or criticisms during the contract, when the contract remains, this would result in overvaluing if your clients issue a payout after their assets have decreased. And furthermore, lawsuits on clients' environmental impacts can degrade Chubb's brand value in sustainable insurance. Chubb, as one of the leading member in promoting sustainability within the insurance field, if your clients are found to be greenwashing, this would unfortunately lead to decrease in the credibility of your sustainability initiative, which we and all of us would want to avoid. Secondly, there is a credibility loss and additionality. Here has mentioned, there are criticisms on the effectiveness of voluntary carbon credits. And this is the chart that I have mentioned with Vera's investigation into Vera. So as you can see, between 94.9 million cubic tons of carbon dioxide that Vera has published, investigations find that only 5.5 million tons of carbon dioxide has actually been reduced, which means that this is not really an effective way, and there is a difficult to monitor if purchase of carbon credits leads to actual decrease in emission if looking from these examples. And many carbon credits are issued in speculative value, as Hira has explained, meaning their offset value can be compromised by any method, such as any disasters, intentional or not, such as forest fires and shutdown to project. And fraudulent actors have also been identified in market, which increase the call for stricter audit and approval procedures from the community. And as a result, as Hira mentioned, EU has banned non-complacent carbon credit in 2020, citing the lack of standardization and impact. And I would like to continue. I would like to give Hira the opportunity to show how these risks can be averted.
Thank you very much, Jun. Now we'll be moving into the final parts of the presentation. We're going to be talking about the risk mitigation strategies that we propose to Chubb and how to avoid the risks that Jun has mentioned earlier. So the first two on the left are going to be targeting oil and gas industries. So the first, as June mentioned, is penalizing the use of low quality carbon credits. So whenever we find that one of our clients is reliant upon these carbon credits that are low quality, then we're going to penalize them with a 5 to 10% of a premium surcharge. And additionally, we hope that in the next 10 years that these firms will remove their policies around carbon credits entirely. And then secondly, we want to set clear, strict goals on our oil and gas industries in terms of their emissions. We found that in the Chubb Climate Plus reports from last year that there were some very loose guidelines that were mentioned in the report. However, we think that it's very important to make sure that there are very clear standards that are public to both investors and the mass, as well as the actual clients themselves, so that they understand what the goal for Chubb is. And then moving to the right side, which is more focused on the Chubb Climate Plus initiatives. First is going to be the enhanced monitoring of Chubb Climate Plus. As June mentioned, if one of our clients is selling these carbon credits, then that can be an adverse risk to ourselves, whether that's through legal cases or through potential reputational harm. And so we think that we should flag 30% or flag firms that use more than 30% of their funds raised through carbon credits. And in our hopes, we would like to remove those clients entirely because the risk of those clients is too far or too great for Chubb to handle. And then finally, we have the increased transparency engagement. In the past year, there were 2 sustainability reports that were published by Chubb. However, these pages only included roughly 2 pages in total talking about Chubb, mostly overlapping the same ideas. And we believe that although the initiative was created last year, there wasn't enough thought and initiative to be included in these reports. And because of the increase in investor activism, it's important to make sure that Chubb is very clear in their goals and what they're hoping to seek in future years. So now going into the cost breakdown of what this risk strategy might include, we decided to break it up into 3 different scenarios, best, base, and worst case scenario. And because it's difficult to predict how much of our sales are actually going to be lost through premiums, we broke it down into the exposed premiums or exposed revenue within our certain industries. So within oil and gas, we believe in the best case that it'll be a 5% exposure to the above mentioned risks. And then in the best case, 20% exposure, worst case, 50% exposure. In 2023, Chubb reported $1.85 billion in revenue from premiums in the oil and gas industry. So those were the financial figures that we found for that. And then for the low quality carbon credits, we decided based on the $360 million that they profited from the premiums last year that again, with the 5, 20, 50% premiums lost. And then we created a formula for the 50% of exposed revenue from the oil and gas industry, as well as 100% of the low quality carbon credits revenue loss to create the projections of the 3 scenarios below. And then for the reasons of loss, we've outlined some of the reasons why we believe the 5, 20, 50% scenarios and cases. In the worst case scenario, we think that some of the clients might push away from Chubb. They might not believe in the way that Chubb is moving forward. However, we've seen the way that Chubb has outlined in their sustainability reports that they want to be the leader in sustainability change. And we believe that making sure that the oil and gas industry knows what Chubb wants to accomplish is very crucial. And in the best case, we hope that there's very little risk and very little exposure to the risks that we mentioned above. And that brings us to the end of the presentation. So next, we'd like to open the floor to any questions that you might have. We've created some appendix slides for you, and we're happy to dive into any topics that you're interested in. Thank you very much for your time.
Thank you. Really appreciate the time and the presentation on this really important topic. As I listen to the presentation, I'm struggling to connect the ethical problem, if it's ethical or more reputational, is what we're trying to solve. I understand that the carbon pollution is a significant problem to our planet, but can one of you really help me understand and pinpoint how we're going to be able to impact or solve this issue or is it really just a reputational problem that we are really addressing here?
I believe it's mostly the ethical side that we're mostly focused on. As some of us have mentioned, there's really a little additionality when it comes to what carbon credits do into the market. When you invest like $100 million into these carbon credits, as June has mentioned, really only 5% of these become additional to the environment. And so as we look into carbon credits issued by scope, we see that the vast majority of carbon credits issued are through forestry and land issue. And most of these are speculative and go far into the future, as well as they don't include proper auditing when it comes to if these projects actually turn out to be what they are supposed to be. And so when it comes to how Chubb should react, we think that if one of our Chubb Climate Plus clients are involved in the industry for forestry, then they should be very cautious, and we should be cautious as insurers of these clients that they're not selling these low quality carbon credits within these markets.
Agreeing with what Hiro mentioned. I think that us as Chubb, or especially you as Chubb and us as consultants, we're trying to really move forward and push forward Chubb Climate Plus, and we cannot ethically do that and say that we are trying to lead a change in an industry if we are allowing our clients to play with the exact thing that we're trying to combat. So I feel like if we are going to push this agenda of Chubb Climate Plus forward and try to gain customers by saying that we're trying to help them be more sustainable and net carbon zero, I don't think we can ethically say that we can have clients as customers that are really colliding with our vision. So that's what I think that we're trying to get to.
If I could, let me follow up on that. First of all, thank you for the presentation. Thank you for the slides being clear enough for all of us to read. You mentioned, if we do this, here's the potential fallout of customers. Do you have any sense if we begin charging a 5 to 10% premium for customers that we judge to be only greenwashing, even though they're obeying the law, do we have a sense of what our competitors will do? Will they let us simply let customers go away and penalize our shareholders? Or do you believe that they will match our ethical posture? We're the board of directors. Our job is to protect shareholder value while considering other stakeholders. If you're going to have my customers walking away, I've got to be assured that I'm not doing something wrong as a steward of shareholder value.
Yes, that is certainly a valid concern. However, in long term, we believe that because of the increasing importance of increasing implementation of stakeholder theory in the world as a whole, we believe that sustainability issues will become a bigger issue, and companies that do not lead the market and only simply comply to governmental sustainability mandates will fall behind in customer favor. And we believe that promoting sustainability will first and foremost increase your brand value and make sure that your premium brand identity will be ensured through through becoming a sense of like a showing an example of who industry leaders in sustainability measures are.
Your
Adding to that,
analysis. Go ahead.
I just wanted to point out what Delta did, for example. So if you could click in the, Delta's carbon neutrality plan. So Delta actually had a carbon neutrality plan and still does. However, even though that they had this, they find themselves today in a big lawsuit where they could lose $1.26 billion just because they weren't, even though they say they are in a carbon neutrality plan, they weren't pioneers and in saying, okay, we're not going to rely on carbon credits. We are going to go one step ahead and really make sure that our investment is seen and is realized actually. So here, as you can see, in the plan, they mentioned three different areas where they want advancements. However, in reality, as we saw in the lawsuit, most of their carbon offset is really based on the carbon credits. So I think that as part of the board of directors, you should look into what will happen if you are not pioneers. Maybe you will lose a few customers if you are, because you will see the price will be higher and you can lose a few clients. However, in 2 or 3 years, we're going to have a big lawsuit against us. What is the opportunity cost of that?
I
In the
have,
United States, we've seen the ESG movement lose a tremendous amount of momentum over the last 9 to 12 months. So largely, it's going to depend upon the European Union, the administration of the United States, but these things are in wavelength. There is a carbon trading market. And it seems that to me, and tell me that I'm wrong, I may be full of beans here, seems to me that you're calling out the distortions and the problems of the carbon trading market and fixing it on the back end by charging extraordinary premiums to customers that we judge to be somehow getting around the rules, and we judge greenwashing to be wrong. I'm not sure I'm not sure we want to be in that business. Can you give me examples of other companies who have successfully done this?
So I think one of the things is that we want to be a pioneer in this space, and there aren't a whole lot of, especially insurance companies, that are going into this direction. One of the things that I also want to highlight is that last year in 2024, Chubb made roughly 50 billion in premiums from all the overall premiums, and the oil and gas industry was only roughly 3% or 4% of the entire revenue source. The large majority of the revenue for Chubb does not come from the oil and gas industry. And we believe that even though there has been a shifting landscape in the current administration, as well as some consumer sentiment, there will be consumers in the US and abroad that may have lawsuits that that Chubb will be involved in. And that could be one of the larger issues for Chubb.
Okay, thank you for that.
I have 3 questions. The first is, I did not understand the elderly disabled Delta explanation. Can somebody clarify that a little bit?
Yes.
The second question is going to be,
Oh, sorry.
what ethical duty do we, Chubb, have to get involved in this climate stuff? And my third question is, what is Slack division? But if we could start with the elderly disabled Delta deal.
Yes, sir. So the lawsuit consists of a few different distinctions. So as it seeks a class action lawsuit, there is 2 different kind of customers that the lawsuit is trying to appeal to. so it's appealing to everybody, every customer that has flight Delta since 2020, since March of 2020, and it's seeking a payout of two different payouts: a $5,000 payout for everybody that was elderly or disabled that flew in that time, and then a $1,000 payout for everybody that, for the rest of the people that flew with Delta. I think this is just a move towards just making sure that our elderly and disabled are not, aren't taking lightly.
Hoodwinked?
And it was more of a representation of how we calculated and estimated the $1.26 billion that this would cost to Delta, as a 56% of the revenue, and that would be coming of the payout would be going to elderly and disabled, and 44% to the rest of the population.
So the
Okay,
lawsuit
understood.
is saying that the elderly and disabled were injured more by flying on Delta than on other airlines?
No, they are saying that they deserve a bigger compensation
For
than
what?
the rest.
Compensation for what?
For the same damages. The reason that I'm not really sure why this is what Delta, or why this is what the class action lawsuit is wanting. It was more just as a chart to provide more depth into how we had come into the $1.26 billion valuation of the lawsuit. More than
Thank you.
Okay,
Hero, you mentioned that it's possible that our exposed revenue, if we go with this program, is about 5% revenue loss. Can you tell me what the exposed profitability is?
Before we go there, and that's a great question, Scott. I think Christopher had two more questions he wanted.
I'm so sorry, Chris, you're right.
first is, what ethical duty do we, Chubb, have to be involved in any of this carbon offset stuff? What ethical duty, not legal or financial, but ethical duty? Where does that arise from?
So I think Chubb has already done a great job. And I think one point that I would like to highlight is Chubb themselves in the 2024 or 2023 Climate Initiative Plan stated that they will no longer use carbon credits. They explicitly stated that because they cited that carbon credits do not create additionality, and that they're overall harmful, or more creating more harm towards the environmental initiatives than good. And so I think that's one part of the ethics behind why we believe Chubb should continue forward in this path. However, as you mentioned, I'm sorry, could you repeat the question?
No, I think you're clarifying it well.
Okay.
I don't need to follow up on that. What is slack division? That's my last question. Slack division.
Yes, I can clarify. Selectivism is claiming that you have advocated for a cause without putting the appropriate amount of resources or enthusiasm to said initiative, i.e. greenwashing. So
Understood.
greenwashing in more broader sense, I would apply.
Okay. I'm done, judges.
Go ahead, Scott. You had one on something on revenue you wanted to address. You're on mute.
You're on mute, Scott.
I like Chris's questions better than mine. My question was, if we lose 5% of revenue, what are we losing in profitability? Is that high margin revenue that we're losing, or low margin revenue?
I think it's difficult for us to decide. Based on the materials that we were given from the sustainability report, as well as the financial statements, it's unclear what those margins are for different clients, as well as how many clients. So I think it'd be difficult to look into that unless given more material.
Okay, thank you.
I have a question. Could you go forward? You had or I think it may be back one before the financial chart and how you actually, yeah. So I'm wondering how. So we're going to charge companies for I guess the term is it green lighting? You guys are calling it greenwashing. Sorry. And my question is, how do you enforce it? How do you determine that they've actually? How do you verify that they've actually have
Very great point. Very
What-
very great point. My apologies.
how do you enforce it contractually?
So usually in the United States, most firms, when they're publishing their 10K statements, currently they're publishing the 3 or 4 scope models according to the UN's guide on climate change. And so within that scope, they publish how many carbon credits they purchase, as well as all the different initiatives that they're buying into. And so that's one way of seeing like the behind the scenes, the transparency behind the firms. However, like you mentioned, there is really no auditing in this area. And that is one area that is one aspect that will be challenging for Chubb to look into and determine. But we believe that it is critical, and we think that'd be great for Chubb's underwriters to go through training and look into what this really means for underwriting each of their clients.
Scott, Christopher, do you guys have any?
I'm all good, thank you.
Scott?
I have no other questions.
Okay, with that said, we really appreciate your time and going through this case. I'm going to say, let's all break character and judges, let's provide feedback. I'll start with my colleagues. I'll let them start and jump into it. Scott, do you have any feedback?
Sure. Tone, pace, emphasis, the facial expressions, all the nonverbal cues. Boy, those were all there. This was a well-crafted visual and audio presentation. The one thing I struggle with, which is what Nathan and Christopher had both brought up, what maybe I just wasn't listening well. What I missed was a clear statement of what is the ethical question? Is it right to blank when blank? Because coming from that, then we can talk about whether we should simply obey the law, whether we should exceed what the law requires, or whether we should try to clean up the carbon transaction markets. If that should be lobbying our efforts, if that should be our effort rather than doing it at the back end. But the presentation was very clear, and I enjoyed listening to all of you.
Great. Christopher?
Yeah, I like the presentation. You guys are good. And I'm with Scott. I'd like to see a little more focus on the ethical implications of what we Chubb are doing and what we should be doing. But I think it was a great presentation. This slides were very beneficial, and they seem to be, well drafted. So I commend you on that. And that's all I have to say.
Yeah, I want to say thank you, Scott and Christopher. I want to say that this was an incredibly ambitious presentation and subject. This was when I read through the notes before, I was like, oh boy, I can't fall asleep on this one. I knew it was going to be what they say, tall cotton. You're going to be talking some really heavy stuff. But you took it on with a lot of vigor and brought a lot of knowledge, because I was pretty nervous about you guys taking the subject on. I really like how you formatted the presentation, and you guys had opportunities where you could have dug deeper, and you probably bit off a little more than you chew here in the time. Kind of is a term, boiling the ocean. I wish you just condensed it a little more. I think and then maybe really hitting on the financial impact. When you talk about risk and what the potential to lose money is, that really captures that captures a bunch of executives their attention. If you could have, you talked about the risk to Delta, but you didn't talk about what the exposure was really to Chubb in that regard. You said this is what the risk is to the polluters, but not necessarily to the folks that are insuring them. And what's their exposure? And if you could have brought that home, that could have really highlighted what not necessarily it could have highlighted better the ethical dimension and where we're walking into some really risky waters here. And then I like Chris Scott said as well, you kind of cleaning it up on the back end through I don't know, I'll call it policies and so I don't even know how you get folks to sign up to a deal like that. But you know, maybe the focus on the front end of what exposure and why we want to change course, why we want to focus in highlighting the things that we can do would have flowed a little better. But you guys tackled one hell of a problem, excuse my language, and you didn't shy away from it. And I appreciate it in the education involved in it as well. Great job. That's all we have. So Hugo, I'll turn it over to you.
I just wanted to say thank you to the judges and for your time and everything. I think yeah, we did probably tackle a bit too big of a fish, but yeah, I think to be pioneers in this topic, we kind of had to dig deep. I don't know. I think once we started it, doing the research and everything, it was a bit late to change. And so there were a few facts probably that we are missing. Probably don't have the resources to go dig deep enough. And probably, or maybe if we actually got more resources from Chubb, like actual data, maybe we could have done better. But I think, yeah, that was some great feedback you guys gave us, and I really appreciate your time. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you, guys.